the elves were truly in control, and in a lot of ways they were playing both sides of the civil war in Skyrim. Well, I find that intriguing. It makes me stroke my chin like this and go, Because, as Kanye was saying, there are a lot of parallels between what's going on in Skyrim and what's going on in our world, vis-a-vis the elves. There is this stigma against Talos worshippers, right? In the media. The media have a real bone to pick with Talos worshippers, specifically. And this is for religious reasons, the elves themselves have a specific concept, like they are shards of the gods, they are the inheritors of Tamriel, and man is inferior. There's a real supremacism to it. There's a real superiority complex going on. They consider the other varied races of Tamriel, the fucking Khajiit, the Argonians, and of course, the humanoid races of men. For all intents and purposes, they are cattle in the eyes of the Altmer. But hey, this isn't a conspiracy theory. This is simply the culture and the religion of the High Elves, right? So, a Nord is forbidden to take pride in the worship of Talos in Skyrim? Absurd. Well, that's absurd, right? And Ulfric said enough is enough. Get the elves out of Skyrim. Cucked empire, get the fuck out, right? What is this interventionalism in Skyrim? Get the fuck back to Cyrodiil, Re-establish the freedom to worship Talos as our ancestors did. Hey, that's Skyrim for you, right? But in our world, there really is no wiggle room when it comes to the criticism of elves. And it's not Talos that they have a problem with. It's Christ, frankly, and it's the worship of Christ that they have a problem with. And for a religion so key to the development of the Western world, both morally and culturally, you do have to start asking yourself the question, why are we so conditioned and fixated on throwing it away, on getting rid of it, on inverting and mocking the core principles and values of the Christian moral framework? Well, to quote Al Goldstein, the infamous elvish publisher of Screw magazine, the only reason that elves are in pornography is that we think Christ sucks. Catholicism sucks. We don't believe in authoritarianism. Pornography thus becomes a way of defiling Christian culture, as it penetrates to the very heart of the American mainstream, and is no doubt consumed by those very same wasps. Its subversive character becomes more charged. I think it's this cultural contempt for what amounts to Amalek, right? The ancient religious enemy of the Elvish people. Which is ironically the kind of impetus, it's the motivation behind things like critical race theory and, quote-unquote wokeness. From a psychohistorical point of view, I guess this is what people call the Elvish revolutionary spirit. It's just about the endless revolution, right? So this is not my culture. And you'll find that a lot of the controversy to do with Kanye West at the moment is because the guy is unashamedly a Christian. And in fact, really, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Now more than ever, this topic in particular is of profound cultural significance. It's the key puzzle piece to understanding how the system has gotten to this point, how things have become so dystopian and intolerable. It's literally the one-word, one-syllable answer to the question, why can we not have nice things anymore? Well, the only way to understand the modern world is with this puzzle piece here. Call it a jiggy. It's the black jiggy that will fuck up Kazooie's entire fucking sense of reality. It's not for the faint of heart, frankly, but the only reason I mention it now is because the Kanye situation. Kanye is taking a stand and using his position as this almost untouchable cultural figure, once worshipped by the leftist media, as a luminary of this black, largely elvish-produced American music industry. I'm not a really big fan of rap, but I can respect Kanye West. He has that schizo kind of he sees the truth, he wants to say it, he wants to communicate, but unfortunately for him, it's completely taboo to even say that the elves play any part whatsoever in, king-making when it comes to the media and politics and academia as well. Entertainment industries of various types, including gaming, where they seem to have taken over both the journalism side and, of course, they call the shots and they gatekeep. I mean, how long has Jason Schreier been this self-appointed moral authority of the video game industry? We're talking about a 2% population, overrepresented in some cases by 70%. It's unprecedented, and it should be something that people are at least acknowledging. And yet, there is this shroud of invisibility cast, truly occult in scope. And over here in the UK, London is a massive hub of elvish banking, finance, and power. The politicians, they take their orders from the bankers. That's just how it works. It doesn't matter which party wins. Each party must answer to these elvish bankers. And this is obvious, really. I feel like everybody knows this on some level. They see it, all of the actors and entertainers within the Hollywood apparatus, they all know the score. They know how things work. And, again, look at the Me Too thing that kicked off a few years ago. Right, okay, well, who gets named? What about Epstein and Maxwell? What about their clients? How about this FTX scandal, Sam Bankman-Fried, right? This guy embezzles like $60 billion from the crypto market. He steals users' deposits and gambles with it, loses it, gets liquidated. And he has the New York Times writing puff pieces about him right now. How does he have this much support? Well, it turns out, second biggest donor to the Biden campaign over the last 2 years. Everybody knows this is an elvish system. It doesn't persecute its own. It doesn't prosecute its own in a lot of situations. I mean, the entire system of modern Western democracy is now just a elvish Weimar smut show. It's inconsequential, and it functions just as basically like a lowest common denominator, 2 minutes hate, like an Orwellian, rage-fueled ape wank. It's just like a gorilla masturbating in captivity. Well, the swarthy elf films the sordid scene. This is art, he thinks to himself as the drool pours down his chin. It's the erotica of Marxism, pleasure in destruction, and jazz music's playing in the background. Hard bop here, just like upsetting, fucking atonal jazz. And at the center of it all, just this ape just furiously masturbating, This is kind of like the energy of the people who are kind of in charge of our society right now. I mean, let's just be honest. I mean, the 20th century was the elvish century, and we're living in the hangover of that right now. It is inevitably going to be painful to address the elephant in the room, the olifant in the room, I should say. With so much censorship at the behest of these giant corporations, largely elvish owned, it's not looking good, but we do have these new rogue elements within the elite, like, for instance, Elon, right? Because Elon, whatever he's up to on Twitter, if it results in the ability to discuss these issues easier, then holy shit are we in for an absolute revolution when it comes to the culture. Kanye's not insane, but the media is telling us he's insane. The media is totally owned by elves. We know that. It's not a secret, it's just reality. Pointing that out can get you fired from your job. But you could make the same exact accusation. You could say, hey, Muslims run the media. Christians run the media. No one gives a shit. The Khajiit run the media. It's crickets, no one gives a shit. So the lady doth protest too much. And also, when you've been down as many rabbit holes as I have, you realize, okay, well, there were a lot of people, historically, that had an issue with the elves as well. For a lot of the same reasons contemporary Europeans would have an issue. It's like, you guys, you've taken over our societies, you've subverted our culture, and you're trying to harm us actively. And for whatever reason. What is that? Oh, it's religious reasons. Well, that doesn't respect my individuality. I was raised in the 90s. I was supposed to be some groovy, enlightened individualist. I don't even have to be a Christian if I don't want to. I can be an egghead atheist. It's flash forward to 2022. No one's having a great time, right? Because there's this pointy elvish boot on my face 24/7 telling me You don't deserve respect. You're done. You're over. Your people have no future, and that's a good thing, and it's also funny. And then Kanye comes out wearing like a White Lives Matter shirt, and for some reason that causes a meltdown, and it's like, wow. We've entered like a totally absurd realm of clownery at this point. This feels like Malcolm X all over again. This is the critical point where suddenly the American black community is going to start to differentiate elvish power from quote-unquote white power. Because fundamentally, America wasn't built by elves. And when you look into it, it seems like at the time, the elves were involved largely in the merchant class, and they owned a lot of slave ships. They sold a lot of slaves, not only to the Europeans, but also the Ottomans and the Asians, right? So we don't want to talk about that because if you're a Marxist, you have to frame things very, very specifically. And we know that Marx was an elf. A lot of the intellectual bedrock of the left, and by proxy, this modern woke movement, well, it's inherently elvish. All of the key intellectuals are elves. Kanye is sitting here going, my community has been used as a proxy weapon. We've been exploited, manipulated, right? Used as a pawn. A community of people used as like a political tool, right? That's the black community. Kanye's calling it out. And he's preempting this, saying, you're going to have to kill me if you want to shut me up. And, just watch them censor this interview. Boom, the interview disappears. He's proven right. Because there's one thing that you cannot criticize in this modern woke culture. Don't even think about it. And then what they've done is they've pitted different communities against each other in the West through influence. I mean, politics is downstream from culture. As Andrew Breitbart said, you got the drag queen story hour in schools. I mean, it's all over the UK right now. And, while we're on the topic, just in general, the trans ideology, you can trace that back to the work of Magnus Hirschfeld, a Weimar-era sexologist, laying the groundwork for a lot of the weirdos that would follow, especially guys like John Money, for instance. I think it was his idea to critique the gender binary itself. No longer do we just have men and women. There's now this gender spectrum where a lot of it is this ambiguity. The elves, for some reason, are obsessed with cultivating and injecting ambiguity into the system, into society. It's some kind of Hegelian thing. Marx was very influenced by Hegel and this idea of the dialectic, that change has to come from chaos, and how much more chaotic can you get than the transgender movement? It's just full of the Roman Empire tier stuff, but I remember a time when people were actually sane. Or at least the subversion was more subtle, and therefore society could kind of function. It looks to me like there has been this cultural war of attrition happening subtly since the 60s, I guess. And this could be tied up with the whole McCarthyism thing in the 50s, where Americans were super paranoid about being subverted by Marxists, right? And it turned out, America did get subverted by Marxists. GG, that's it, no refunds. You wonder why there's this stereotype. And then you're immediately browbeaten. It's you don't want to be accused of anti-elfism, right? If you work in the entertainment industry, you're going to be done forever. Kanye will be blacklisted. He will be targeted by the media from this point onwards in an almost Trumpian fashion. If you saw how the media treated Trump, and ultimately, they're in a bit of a catch-22 situation. It's right, well, this is why the topic of free speech just once a given. It was like a liberalism thing, of course, yeah. Free speech is now an issue, now that a independent black man who is wealthy thanks to capitalism, this non-communist, non-democrat, Red Guard, points out the insane privilege and power of the elvish diaspora, especially within the music industry, especially within the rap genre, right? And nope, sorry, but all of that empowerment, all of that signal boosting black voices, it's out the window. Sorry, you criticized the wrong white guy, man, because of course elves are white. Or maybe they're not. Another very ambiguous topic, that's for sure. The problem is, I don't even think that Kanye needs the media. I'm thinking that perhaps the time of the elves is coming to an end. Perhaps it's time to sail back to, the Undying Lands. Established in 1948, by the way, with the help of Winston Churchill. It was a kind of post-war agreement, right? But the point is, I feel like things can't continue. Like, without the ability to just articulate how we're feeling, what we see, things will just get worse. And this will eventually explode into some kind of conflict. So, the healthy thing to do, regardless of your political persuasion, would be to openly discuss the elves, right? Because in the UK, Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour leader, he's a massive retarded communist, but his low-key endorsement of the Stormcloaks has caused quite a lot of controversy within the British media, right? So, but he's not based. He just has some issues with the elves for his specific ideological reasons, right? It's like the elves have really pissed off quite a lot of groups over the years, right? But ultimately, it's just not tolerated. The media will never let up. Corbyn has been fucking destroyed, because you can't openly criticize the elves. They're too powerful, and they control too many institutions in our society. Is that a controversial thing to say? That's all Kanye said. There was no hate in that interview, just as there's no hate for me pointing this out. I don't want this to be the case, If anything, I've been like an Eldar file for most of my life. Back when I wanted to go to film school and like I jerked off to Hollywood and stuff, and I'm far beyond that now. It's not important to me anymore because, again, seeing Hollywood for what it is and seeing the kind of religious contempt behind a lot of massive Hollywood films, it's eye-opening. It's like, wow, well, this wasn't made by someone in good faith to entertain me. It was made to insult me, and in many cases demean me and my culture, right? And it's like, hashtag the noticing. Fact is, even a lot of normies are starting to think to themselves, maybe Ulfric was onto something.